Hello and welcome to our third last session of the Inspiring Workplaces Summer Series. Before we get stuck in, I just want to say a big thank you to Stefan, my colleague yesterday, who stepped in and did a fantastic job hosting with Carol Abade. And because I had a bit of a puppy emergency. So thank you so much, Stefan. You stepped in and did an amazing job. But to the remainder of the summer series, we actually have a gig every Wednesday, but we've moved it to Friday to end the series in style. So we've got a fantastic new act for you coming this Friday, 9 a.m. San Francisco, around 5:30 in London. So today, we've been looking forward to this one all summer. We're talking about thriving in the new normal, and we'll be looking at some research and best practice around how work's adapting during COVID-19 and the pandemic that won't leave us. Taking us through this research is the Head of Engagement and Leadership at Questback. Like all our previous speakers, she has a passion and expertise in trying to improve the employee experience and drive organisations forward. And it's a great honour of mine to welcome Kate Pritchard. Hello, Kate.
Hi, thanks, Matt. It's great to be doing this with you. Really excited about this session.
Yeah, me too. And both new, happy, proud owners of puppies that I've just found out. So, yeah, fantastic. Well, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, and I'll be back later to have a chat with you afterwards.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Matt. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen, and hopefully everybody can see my screen. So thanks ever so much, Matt. Really looking forward to this session. So as Matt says, I work for Questback. We are an experience management company, really helping organisations to improve the employee experience by providing software and consultancy in this area. And I've been working in this field for over 20 years, working with a range of organisations, helping them to measure, understand and improve the employee experience. So delighted to be talking to you today about thriving in the new normal. And what I want to cover in the time that we have together today are three main things. What I'd like to do is share some research that we did at Questback during COVID-19 to look at the state of employee engagement during this time, and then looking forward at the priorities for HR for the rest of this year, and then to talk about how we can motivate employees in this new world of work that we're entering into. So to start with, I'd like to share some research that Questback have done over the last few months. So we've been surveying employees during the pandemic, really to understand how they feel about the sort of work experience during the COVID pandemic, and also how they feel specifically, those of them who are now working remotely, and how that has impacted their health and well-being. So this is research that's been ongoing since the beginning of the pandemic back in March. And during June, we also did some research of HR leaders to understand the impact of COVID-19 on their businesses during this year. So I don't need to tell anybody that this has been a really challenging time for businesses and really for all of us. So really very quickly during March, many of us were all of a sudden working remotely, working flexibly around other commitments. And what this meant for organisations was that there was massive uncertainty and disruption. And the focus was very much on people's well-being and the health and safety of employees. Organisations used the furlough scheme. Many employees had reduced working hours, and many were made redundant. So really difficult time with huge disruption. Of the HR leaders that we spoke to, these were real issues. 61% had used the furlough scheme, so not far from what we know from the official statistics. Half of the organisation had reduced the hours of some of their employees, and over a third had to make redundancies. So these were real issues that the people that we spoke to had really faced. So given this backdrop and this really difficult time that organisations have had, it might surprise you to know that during the pandemic, levels of employee engagement actually remained pretty high. So we asked the HR leaders that we spoke to how they would describe the current levels of employee engagement within their organisation. And 59% of them described engagement as either good or excellent during this time. What was perhaps even more surprising was that 35% of them said that employee engagement had actually risen since previous to the pandemic. So during the pandemic, they felt that employee engagement had been higher than it was previously. And 49% of respondents said that it had stayed the same. So more people were likely to say that it had improved, engagement had improved, than it had actually declined during this time, which is quite surprising given the circumstances that we were all working under. But this was actually backed up from the research that we've done of employees during COVID-19 as well. So we were really looking specifically at how people felt about their own working environment and the support that they were receiving during COVID-19 from their employers, and how they were managing their health and well-being. And results were overwhelmingly positive. Employees did really feel that the leadership team were doing their best in very difficult circumstances, that there was a high level of confidence that leaders were making the right decisions for employees. And there was also a real recognition that leaders were doing everything that they could to really look after employees from a sort of health and well-being point of view. And I suppose, sort of reflecting on what happened, everything did happen very quickly. So many people were asked very quickly to work from home. Flexibility was accepted because people had other personal things to look after. And the primary concern of organisations was very much around health and well-being. We did find that there were some groups that struggled more with work-life balance. So clearly those who were looking after small children and those who were managing large teams struggled to manage their work-life balance during this time. But on the whole, there was a real belief that employers were doing everything that they could to support employees. And we asked employers specifically what they were doing help employees during this time. And you can see there was a whole range of different things, different initiatives that organisations put in place very quickly. The most common things related to top-down communication. So 70% of organisations had started doing very regular business updates, and 65% were doing frequent messaging from senior leaders directly to all employees. And these were really well received by employees. There was also a big focus on providing guidance and support to employees. So on things like mental health and well-being, so 68% were providing those types of pieces of guidance, 53% provided practical tips on working from home, and 46% really provided information about helplines and employee assistance programs to really support employees in the best way they could. And employees did recognise and appreciate this, and felt that the communication and the support that they received from their organisation was actually better than ever before, more frequent and more people-focused. Were actually some small wins as well during this time. We asked employers what they had stopped doing during COVID-19 that had a positive impact on their organisation. And we got some really interesting responses, but these were sort of typical things that people spoke about. So there was definitely a move from presenteeism and really focusing on hours people were working and the hours that people were putting on their timesheets, to really more of a caring mentality and an assumption that people might not be working standard hours, but people were doing their best to get the work done, and they were being measured now on outputs rather than hours. There was definitely a lot of comments about less unnecessary meetings and much more shorter focus meetings when they did happen. So this was something that was very much appreciated by employees, as well as by the HR people we spoke to, and a feeling that the leadership teams were focusing very much on the business essentials, as we can imagine. So this meant that there was less time spent on vanity projects. We also asked employers what they'd started doing that had a positive impact on their organisation. And this comes back to the sort of support and communication that I've already mentioned. So definitely there was an awful lot of focus on really making sure that leaders were in tune with employees and really spending time communicating on a very regular basis. And similarly, managers through an organisation were really making time to listen to employee concerns and really focusing on staff welfare. And there was a feeling that the meetings that did happen were more organised. They were more focused, more agenda driven and shorter. So, given a really difficult working period, there have been some small wins, and these are things that hopefully will continue as we move forward. So that's some of the information from sort of the past few months during COVID-19. We also spoke to our HR contacts about what they wanted to focus on for the rest of 2020, as hopefully we come out of this pandemic and we start to sort of rebuild our organisations. So we gave a list of 12 potential priorities and asked our contacts how important each of these were. And interestingly, of these 12, all of these were considered to be at least very important to 55% of respondents to our survey. So you can see there's a whole range of different priority areas facing organisations and requiring action. So really a lot of work that HR and organisations feel that they have ahead to rebuild and reboot. And if we just hone in on the top 6, these are sort of 6 key priorities for the road ahead in the new world of work. You can see that these are certainly not quick wins. These are big undertakings. And this, to manage these things successfully, I really believe that there needs to be input and insight from employees. I'd say that key enablers to the success of these initiatives are things like listening to employees, ensuring there's opportunities for collaboration within organisation, that we're listening to people, we're able to innovate with our employees and to involve them in the changes that we're making. So we know that successful change within organisation does require input from employees, and we know that employees actually have a genuine desire to really help organisations to improve and to provide their input. So the other area that we discussed in our survey of HR leaders was around employee listening and employee engagement strategies. What we found was that only 24% of organisations felt that they had a really solid employee feedback strategy in place. Nearly 6 in 10 felt that their employee feedback strategy currently had room for improvement, with 17% saying that it was actually ineffective. So this is quite a concern for organisations at the moment. And while during the crisis, this sort of strategy was sufficient in terms of the communication that was needed to happen at that time, it's really not sufficient when we're really looking to rebuild and really needing to gain the insights from employees to make big organisational changes. But Questback, we talk a lot about the employee listening maturity curve, really working with our clients to help to move them up this maturity curve. We know that for a lot of organisations, the main listening activity that happens is the annual engagement survey. Now, I'm a big fan of employee research and engagement surveys, absolutely. But we know now that listening to employees once a year is absolutely not enough, that it does need to be supplemented by many other opportunities to listen to employees. And if that doesn't happen, then the survey just becomes very tactical, and it's not really it can't be related enough to organisational priorities. So if the annual engagement survey this year happened in February, then that's pretty irrelevant given everything that's happened since then. So it's really important that organisations are able to think about further opportunities to listen to employees and putting opportunities in place for employees to give their feedback so that they can actually help organisations to improve. So as we move up this listening maturity curve, we get to more response-driven feedback when engagement surveys are supplemented by more frequent surveys, so pulse surveys to check in on the actions that have been put in place since the engagement survey. And this does tend to lead to improvements within organisations, but perhaps not on the critical issues that the organisation needs to focus on. So we need to move further up the curve to think about other listening approaches and more agile surveys to make sure that the feedback we're getting from employees is really hitting the mark and really helping organisations to make big improvements that help the business to succeed. So what we're aiming to do is to collect lots of feedback from different sources, provide different methods for getting feedback from employees and really involving them in making business improvements. So such an enormous amount of opportunities now within organisations to listen to employees. These are just some of the methods that we know are commonly used. So while most organisations definitely have an employee survey, so often an annual survey, while many are now supplementing this by fairly regular pulses, there are so many other opportunities to listen to employees and gather really useful feedback that helps businesses to improve. In the survey, we found that only half of the respondents were still just using an annual engagement survey. But for those that were using more of these more sort of newer methods, I guess, things like online communities and collaboration tools, they were seeing huge value from them. So I definitely feel that it's worth organisations exploring the different opportunities of listening to employees and seeing how successful they are. The other thing to bear in mind is to think about listening across the employee life cycle, because you can get really great insights from people depending on where they are within their employee journey. So are people attracted to your organisation? Are people applying for jobs? And if not, why not? When they join, are they getting a decent induction, particularly during this really difficult time? And when people leave, are we getting the insights that we need to really ensure that we can improve the employee experience? We're getting truthful feedback from our employees. So it's really important to take stock and think about the different ways that we can listen to employees, to gather feedback, and actually using this to help us to move our organisations into this new world of work, and to meet the challenges that absolutely lie ahead. So the third thing that I wanted to really focus on was how we motivate employees in this new world of work. And I absolutely feel that listening to employees and feedback is critical to that. But I've listed 4 things that I think are really fundamental, really improving the employee experience within this new world of work. So these are enhancing the work experience, and what I mean there is really the way people are going about their day-to-day job, because the way that many of us are working is quite different to how it was 6 months ago. So thinking about what we can do there to optimise that, what we can do to empower teams, because we know that if we've got high-performing teams, this can really have a positive impact on organisational performance. Thinking about how we support line managers. Line managers were a group that struggled most during the pandemic to manage their work-life balance due to the pressure of sort of managing large teams and supporting them, as well as managing their own change in circumstances. So making sure that this group is supported as they continue to be managing remote teams and continue to need to work a bit differently. And finally, making sure that leaders are continuing to lead with compassion and really continuing with that people-focused approach that was successful during the pandemic. So just to talk a little bit more about each of these. So in terms of enhancing the work experience, there's various aspects to this, I guess. So firstly, thinking about people who are continuing to work from home, continuing to work remotely. When people were asked to work remotely at very short notice, everybody sort of got in and worked as well as they could. But sort of several months down the line, it's perhaps becoming a little bit more difficult to work effectively. Do people have an adequate workspace within their home that's separate? Can they work effectively with other people in the house? Do they have the right equipment? Clearly, they couldn't take everything from the office that they perhaps had before. And how are they coping with the changes in sort of interactions and numerous online meetings every day, which can take its toll on people? So really checking in with people and understanding how they're doing with these new in the new working environment is really important. Similarly, obviously, for those who are key workers and have been working throughout, they've been working at a greater pace than ever. Have they got the equipment they need? Have they managed to maintain any sort of work-life balance, and what can we do to really support their health and well-being is so critical. Thinking again at the different stages of the employee life cycle, and particularly for people that joined an organisation either just before COVID-19 or during the pandemic. Clearly their initial experiences of the organisation are very different to how it would otherwise have been. Perhaps they haven't physically met the work colleagues that they talk to on a regular basis. Perhaps they didn't receive the training and the support they needed up front. So these are things to really check in on and make sure that we're actually focusing on this group of people. Similarly, during COVID-19, for many people, they were asked to sort of change priorities and perhaps change roles at pretty short notice. And probably during that time, there was less opportunity to provide a sort of proper training program. So again, it's really important just to revisit that and make sure that people know what they're to be doing on a day-to-day basis. One of the things we really talk about as being key to the employee experience is having the opportunities to celebrate the moments that matter. And this is something that seems to be sort of much easier when we're all working together and we're working in a group, and we can do things like celebrate project milestones together or celebrate each other's work anniversaries or birthdays. And these things continue to be so important to us. And even though we can't be together, think about how we can make this still a celebration and use this as an opportunity to connect and collaborate, which is so important to employee engagement. And then finally, just thinking about the fundamentals of the role in terms of good job design, making sure that people have the autonomy they need to work effectively, that they can make decisions, that their role does have an adequate amount of challenge, that it's not boring to them, but it's not so overwhelming that their mental health suffers. So really getting that balance absolutely right. And finally, making sure that people do feel that there are opportunities to celebrate their level of achievement within their work. So these are all things that it's only through dialogue, through feedback, that we can really understand. But making time to have these conversations and to get this feedback can really have a positive impact on people's work experience. The second area here is around empowering teams and really thinking about what we can do to ensure that our teams are performing at their best, because we know that if we've got high performing teams, this has obviously a positive impact on organisational performance. So we want our teams to be collaborating well, we want them to be empowered to make decisions. And fundamentals of good teamwork require for everybody to feel a sense of belonging within the team. So for that connection to really be cohesive and people to feel that they have a part in their team, to feel that they are supported within their team, there are people that they can talk to within their team, and also that the input that they provide is valued, so that the work that they do is valued by others and they feel that they have an important role to play within the team. These are real fundamental things, and again, it's definitely worth conversations and feedback within teams to ensure that we are able to have open dialogues like this and able to improve collaboration, which enables teams to be more productive, to innovate better, and ultimately to perform better. And then thinking about how we support our managers. So this is a group that struggled with work-life balance and obviously had a difficult job of managing the transition of all of their team to remote working. It looks like managers will be managing dispersed teams in many cases for quite some time. And it's really important as we work in dispersed teams that we're all still feeling valued and that there is that strong team spirit. And that does rely on managers to really bring people together. So it's so important that managers are supported in their role of managers as line managers, and that they really understand the importance of the people management aspect of the role, which has become more important than ever over the last few months. So things like just spending time one-on-one with team members to listen to their concerns and to allow them to problem solve and to talk about what they want to do to develop, really empower them to make decisions and recognise their achievements. All of these sort of soft skills that have become so important while remaining a good role model and inspiring people to do their best at work. And obviously managers can become even better managers by asking for feedback from their team and really working on this aspect of their role. And then finally, making sure that leaders continue to lead with compassion. So we found that during the COVID-19 crisis, many leaders really focused a lot on spending the time providing updates and talking to employees. Employees said in many cases that they felt closer to the leadership team than ever before because of this. So it's so important that this kind of communication continues. And I know it's difficult as organisations have so much to think about and so much focus on rebuilding, but that was very much appreciated. It's so important as we come out of the crisis that organisations are able to communicate a clear direction. There's been so much change, and it's so important that organisations can communicate where they're going, but also the purpose that they have to really inspire and motivate employees around their organisational purpose. The regular communication is so important, just so that employees know where the business is going, but also feel that they have that opportunity to have their say. So making sure that that is two-way communication. And obviously it's important that leaders are trustworthy, that they're seen to act with integrity and do as they say they'll do. But this leading with compassion is absolutely central to this. So ensuring that leaders are demonstrating that they really care about their employees and continue with the empathic communication. And I just wanted to leave this quote from Jacinda Ardern, which I think is powerful and relevant to this, that she sort of really states that just because she is empathetic and she's compassionate does not mean that she is a strong leader. And I don't think anyone would disagree with that at all. So in summary, these are the sort of 4 things that I'd say are really key for organisations as we approach the new normal, and listening and acting on feedback in all of these areas is really key. So it's all about thinking about how we can enhance the work experience by getting feedback from employees, working out how teams can really collaborate well together and innovate to become real high-performing teams, making sure that line managers feel very supported so that they're able to be role models and really strong people managers, which is so important for employee engagement, and that our leaders continue to lead with compassion. And if we're able to continue to focus on these things by getting feedback from employees on a regular basis, then not only can we improve the employee experience, but we can get really valuable feedback that helps organisations to transform and thrive as we enter this new world of work. So that's it from my presentation.
Thank you so much, Kate. Like always, learned a lot. Lots of thoughts come to mind. I suppose the new normal, in some respects, is what we've always been striving for. But it's been accelerated, which is a good thing. I suppose a couple of comments and then a few questions off the back of that. I've always been a fan of output over hours. I started my career in communications. Started my working life in communications, and that still is. And unless people want to challenge me on LinkedIn, really bad for over service, and it's all about presenteeism and working hard and doing long hours and really churning your employees over. That's my experience. So output over hours has always been my goal for any organisation. If you get the work done, go home or have a life. Yeah. Cutting out unnecessary meetings as well. I'm pretty sure that's fantastic for a lot of people. So not on the positive side, leaders communicating more and being more compassionate. I think there are really good learnings there. That suddenly made me think, does this really back up the argument for the 4-day week? If actually we're focusing on output now over presenteeism and hours and actually being productive, could we actually now get to that 4-day week where we're achieving more and having more of a life?
It's a very interesting point, Matt, isn't it? I think in some industries it's absolutely doable. You're absolutely right that this is something that is still a real issue in so many different industries that I've come across, that people are there because that is the way things, it's the cultural norm that you are expected to be sitting at your desk and getting things done. But actually we know, and I think you're right, that the crisis has shown that we've had to work around other commitments, and it's about what you achieve. So I really hope there's a sea change. To answer your question, clearly it's easier to do in some industries than others, isn't it? There are some of us that have the luxury of being able to plan our work quite well and to perhaps get everything done in a more focused way if we remove these unnecessary meetings, etc. But clearly there's a lot of industries where it's going to be less easy to make a reality.
Yeah, well, there's definitely some organisations that have moved to it, so it'd be good to see how they go doing it.
Yeah, absolutely, one to watch. Yeah.
I actually asked, 15 years ago, I asked my employer if I could have every other Friday, every other Monday off for my 25 days of leave, and they just said no. So I like to think I was already there at the 4-day week. And also, again, just from listening to you and hearing other people's experiences, is it worth going back to basics on some of this stuff? So the whole reward and recognition piece, thank you note and a gift. Now, coming through the door when we're all locked at home, could that not have a massive impact on actual on well-being and the surprise effect of it? I know it's very, very basic stuff, but
but it is, Matt, and I agree completely. It is basic stuff. Nothing I've said is complicated at all. It really is just remembering that we're all people doing our best, and it is all about that interaction, those moments that matter, and really doing what we can to collaborate and work effectively and understand each other, understand how each other work and how to motivate people individually. What motivates you and I might be quite different.
Yeah, absolutely. I think honestly that would have a huge impact. But we're really trying to focus on the humanity in the workplace and inspiring workplaces. And I think just those surprises and a thank you note coming through the post, like one of So,
Absolutely.
it'll make a huge impact.
But it would make a massive impact. I agree. Yeah.
But I think, we're looking forward to sharing this online on demand tomorrow. If you're watching on demand, we hope you've enjoyed it. Will you be conducting more research throughout the pandemic?
We're hoping to, yes, absolutely. Yeah, so the research of employees is ongoing. So that is still something that's happening. So that will be really good to update you on as time progresses. And we'd love to do another survey of HR leaders just to follow up as well and see how they're going, particularly with these sort of 12 areas that they want to really focus on for this year, just to see what progress is made. And hopefully employee listening has been a priority in terms of making those transformations happen.
Well, we'll happily put that if you've got a link, we'll happily put that to our Inspire community.
Amazing, yeah.
And I believe we're going to be issuing one of your reports as well.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. So the report that I spoke about in terms of the HR leaders is going to be published extremely soon, in the next week for sure. So yes, we'll get that to you, Matt, and if you could distribute it, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
We will do. Whilst you're having some downtime, well-deserved downtime. Anyway, well, thank you so much, Kate. Thank you for everybody to watching. We'll be back again tomorrow, our penultimate summer session. It's sad and quite exciting at the same time. It's been quite a run we've been on. So thank you very much, Kate. Thanks everybody else. I'll see you soon.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Bye.